Yi Futian actually killed the law enforcers of the Penglai divine region without hesitation. Furthermore, he had almost killed them all. Silhouettes dropped from the skies above. The number of onlooking practitioners also kept increasing. They were all curious about what was happening. Yi Futian actually killed the law enforcers of the Penglai divine region without hesitation. Furthermore, he had almost killed them all. Silhouettes dropped from the skies above. The number of onlooking practitioners also kept increasing. They were all curious about what was happening. Was this done in a moment of fury? However, the people in the surrounding area were thinking to themselves that they would also be extremely infuriated if such a thing happened to them. But they won't act the same as Yi Futian and recklessly kill so many people. Most of them would endure this injustice without doing anything. Well, there was nothing they could do. They were not as strong as the law enforcers. After all, the true power behind the enforcers were the few top-tier factions in the Penglai continent. These factions were not something practitioners from other continents could fight against. If these enforcers really intended to kill Helian Yu and Beigong Shuang, then surely that must also be the intention of the powers backing the enforcers. Without a doubt, Yi Futian had offended someone. Under these circumstances, the wisest and safest thing to do would be for them to swallow their anger and leave the Penglai continent. If anyone acted as recklessly as Yi Futian, there was an extremely high chance that they would not be able to leave the Penglai continent alive. "How dare you be impudent?" shouted the dignified middle-aged man as he glared at the Beigong Ao in front of him. His voice was very cold, and it seemed to contain an extreme intent to kill. They actually dared to kill the enforcers in front of his very eyes. How insolent could they be? Today we are going to be rather audacious. Beigong Ao seemed to morph into a terrifying thunder god. His eyes turned violet, and the lightning and thunder that shot out from his eyes flew towards his opponent's body. In the vast clear skies above, a violent storm suddenly appeared from nowhere. It seemed like the cataclysmic end of the world had arrived. Witnessing how his daughter was almost killed, Beigong Ao was obviously infuriated. What made him even more afraid was that the other party did not even hesitate a second and set out to kill the moment they arrived. The excuse they made was also extremely flimsy. It was an excuse made for the sake of finding an excuse. It was easily understood that they wanted her dead. If Yi Futian had been slower by just a fraction of a second, Beigong Shuang would likely have been killed by now. "Do you know that the people you have killed are the enforcers of the Penglai divine region?" The dignified middle-aged man exuded a terrifying aura. He was like a monstrous beast, whose aura pressurized the vast space, intimidating everyone in the surrounding area. Yi Futian took a sweeping glance at him and said, "The Penglai divine region enforcers colluded with others to slay practitioners who have come to this Penglai divine region to cultivate in the eastern deity island. There certainly is no wrong in anyone killing such law enforcers. Today, we will help the Penglai divine region and the eastern deity island execute you. Senior Beigong, please." "I'm on it," said Beigong Ao as he nodded. Thick chains of thunder and lightning appeared in the skies above, whipping towards their opponent. Above their opponent, however, an extremely fierce monster appeared. It was a flame dragon with a fearsome crimson body. Its dragon scales were as red as fresh blood. It looked like it had just walked out of magma. With the emergence of the dragon, the skies instantly became extremely hot. Boom! Tens of thousands of streaks of lightning flashed about them, sealing the entire area. The streaks of lightning morphed into rings of lightning and flew towards the opponent. The flame dragon roared once, summoning shadow clones of itself that tried to attack Beigong Ao. However, the space was perfectly sealed by the way of thunder, and the might of the thunder locked the entire area. At the same time, Emperor Helian also acted. Beigong Shuang was not the only one who nearly met her demise. His daughter too nearly lost his life. The eldest princess of the Helian royal family, he levitated to the front of his opponent and faced it. He looked at the dragon and saw that it seemed to be trapped, and it was very confused. It was as though it were about to enter a dream world. With the two extremely powerful practitioners joining hands, the dignified middle-aged man instantly felt immense pressure. His eyes turned a crimson red, forcing himself to be immune to the disruptive effects of the great path of dreams. Yet, he saw an extremely fearsome palm traveling towards him at high speed, aiming to do nothing less than kill him. That was Baigong Ao's thunder palm. His palm was covered in the way of thunder, and it exuded a petrifying, destructive aura. Sensing the destructive power in the palm halo, the dignified middle-aged man reached his arms out, and in the air in front of him, he materialized a giant dragon talon. With the same level of aggression and speed, he sent it flying towards Baigong Ao. The two men collided with each other in close quarters. In that instant, the devastating forces from both attacks morphed into a terrifying great path storm that emerged from the collision, blowing many people away. The storm also completely flattened all the structures on the ground, reducing them to nothing more than dust particles. Even practitioners of the Runhuang stage had to bear immense pressure. At that moment, the opponent saw another pair of eyes. Those eerie orbs attempted to forcefully bring him into a dream world. In that psychic space, a powerful strike attacked him directly, causing the middle-aged man to feel severely uncomfortable. He roared loudly and launched himself towards the sky. The flame dragon swirled around his body, burning up the heavens. The entire space turned into a world filled with hellfire. Along with the apocalyptic dragons flying about, it was a scene that could strike fear even in the bravest of hearts. Despite the fear-inducing scene ahead, Baigong Ao continued to make his way to the middle-aged man. With each step he took, a devastating storm of lightning and thunder swirled around him. The two virtuosos, Baigong Ao and Emperor Helion, once again launched their attacks simultaneously, with the middle-aged man trapped between them. This time, 3 streaks of sword were orbiting about in the heavens above, each exuding an incomparably terrifying killing aura of the way of the sword. Streams of swords appeared in the skies, merging into the sword will. The 3 streaks of sword will are so powerful. Many people paid attention to the two parties, and thus completely overlooked the presence of the 3 streaks of sword will floating about in the skies. The 3 swords have begun to accumulate an increasingly terrifying aura. When the two parties collided again, the sword will simultaneously exploded. It morphed into a stream of the path of the sword, piercing downwards into the space from above the heavens. Boom! The intense storm that emerged from the collision permeated the vast space. The Punglai divine region even seemed to tremble for a moment. At that moment, many people in the Punglai divine region raised their heads to look at the skies in the distance. In the heavens, 3 terrifying swords descended from the heavens. They could vaguely see 3 sword streams, each stream containing an incomparable sword might. Some distance away, Jun Xiuyan was drinking and laughing with his friend in a tavern when he saw the sword streams. It appeared spectacular and gorgeous. Despite being far from them, he could still sense the elegance from the swords. However, Jun Xiuyan creased his eyebrows, got up, and swiftly flew towards a certain location. How could that be? How could even this fail? Killing a few small fries from other continents was no big deal to him. All he needed to do was find an excuse, then everything would be resolved. Many strong practitioners followed behind Jun Xiuyan. They moved extremely quickly, cutting through the empty space above. Numerous people pointed their sights at the battleground. The terrifying storm of the Great Path gradually dissipated. Everyone was staring at the dignified middle-aged man. He was an enforcer that had already reached the 7th level of the Divine Wheel. Sword will surrounded his body. After being pierced by sword will, his body was slowly dematerializing. His eyes let out expressions of fear, resistance, as well as anger and despondence. He did not expect to die there. He was about to lose his life, just for the sake of executing a plan. Zoom! Sword will bloomed. The man's body faded away and disappeared into the heavens and earth. He had fallen. As he died, the surrounding space became silent. Even the virtuosos felt a tremble in their hearts. He really killed him. Even the leader of the enforcers was also slain. This was a high-level Runhuang virtuoso. A few strong auras approached from a distance, and there were even more people coming over just to watch the excitement. The people of the Punglai divine region sensed that a fight broke out and scurried over, and so there were more people gathered. Jun Xiuyan also arrived along with his friend and followers. Upon seeing the silhouettes fading away, his face turned rather gloomy. His friend was also the same, their cold gazes sweeping towards Yi Futian and his party. "You did this?" said a youth. Renhuang standing beside Jun Shuyan spoke aloud, his tone icy cold. "Yes, we did this," Yi Futian replied as he looked at the youth. "Take them down." Seeing that Yi Futian still showed that cold and arrogant attitude towards him like that time on the Rain Deity Terrace, Jun Shuyan instantly felt a strong intent to kill him. Beigong Ao and Emperor Helion let out a fearsome aura. Looking at the strong practitioners gathered around them, they stepped out at the same time, letting out an extremely cold air. Even though they had already guessed that Jun Shuyan was the mastermind behind this, but they did not expect Jun Shuyan to completely reveal his true intentions and order his men to take them down. Perhaps his arrogance has caused him to not care one bit. He was too arrogant, too full of himself. "Aren't you going to investigate what happened first?" Beigong Ao asked as he looked at Jun Shuyan. "They killed law enforcers, so take them down and bring them back for investigation. If anyone resists, kill them without exception." The reply that Beigong Ao received was an icy voice filled with murderous intent. If they resisted, they would be killed without exception. There was no need for Jun Shuyan to question what happened. He knew clearer than anyone the exact details of what had happened. He only wanted the results. It was just that things progressed a little differently from what he had planned out. No matter, the result would not change. Zoom! Just as he had finished speaking, 3 streaks of sword will arced across the space and flew towards him in an instant. Careful! Someone acted to block the strike. His palm halo stopped right in front of the sword will. With a loud explosion, the attack meant to parry the sword strike was easily shattered by the sword will. The breath-stopping pressure caused Jun Shuyan's face to turn ashen. He retreated in a flicker, moving at an incredible speed. At the same time, a few silhouettes stood in front of him. Naturally, they could not allow anything to happen to Jun Shuyan. However, the sword will did not continue traveling forward. Instead, it traced an elegant arc, turned around and straight away returned to above Yi Futian's head. Seeing this, Jun Shuyan's face turned especially gloomy. He walked in front of the people who were in front of him, his eyes glaring daggers at Yi Futian. Yi Futian was making a fool out of him. However, he certainly felt the threat of death from the sword will. "You want me to follow you onto the Eastern Deity Island? What makes you think you are worth that much?" Yi Futian sarcastically said. The people who heard him let out a perplexed expression. It seemed that these two knew each other. Then, based on the implicit message behind Yi Futian's words, the cause of whatever that happened before was this. Jun Shuyan wanted Yi Futian to be his subordinate and follow him onto the Eastern Deity Island. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. It was only at this moment that everyone noticed Yi Futian's strength. He was only at the 3rd level of the divine wheel. Yet he could continuously slay Renhuang practitioners. He had even killed a high-level Renhuang. Although that was only possible because there were 2 people keeping the high-level Renhuang. The target was ultimately still at the 7th level of the divine wheel. It was still very obvious that Yi Futian's sword was extremely powerful. Furthermore, the sword that Yi Futian unleashed just now was strong enough to shock his opponent, and Jun Chuyan panicked so much that he retreated in a hurry. This was solid proof that Yi Futian's cultivation level was only a small part of his true strength. It could perhaps even be said that his strength far surpassed his cultivation level. It was only at this moment that everyone noticed Yi Futian's strength. He was only at the 3rd level of the divine wheel. Yet he could continuously slay Renhuang practitioners. He had even killed a high-level Renhuang. Although that was only possible because there were 2 people keeping the high-level Renhuang. He was not worthy enough to have Yi Futian follow him. At the 7th level of the divine wheel, didn't think he was worthy enough. Obvious that Yi Futian's sword was extremely powerful. No matter how talented or strong Yi Futian unleashed or his group was strong enough to shock his opponent. Jun Chuyan was determined so much that he noticed how unworthy he was. This was solid proof. He killed numerous law enforcers and engaged in mindless slaughter in the part of his true strength. How dare you be audacious and arrogant that his strength far surpassed his cultivation level. Don't even think about leaving. There was no way he could have managed to do all in an icy tone. This man is so domineering, steeped in murderous intent. Many people thought silently. Take all of them down. Yi Futian was way too headstrong. Although many people had already guessed the reason for his behavior, he did not try to conceal his intentions anymore. He did not even bother finding an excuse. Jun Chuyan was a man of high status. Had already hinted strongly at the cause of the entire fiasco. One of the most powerful factions on the entire explain anything either. Jun just wanted all of them dead. Some underhand the moment he gave his orders, Silhouette but given how strongly Yi Futian and even the people from other continents, there was a high chance he might end up surrounded Yi Futian. That sword strike that Yi Futian unleashed, the atmosphere in the area became extremely heavy. Indeed, Emperor Helian and Beigong very had an extremely gloomy look about them. Eyes exuded malicious and murderous intent. Trouble. He only had one thought now. Beigong Ao had originally wanted to let his daughter leave. He displayed no trace of the indifference he showed just moments ago. Yang Dongqing, on the rain on the other hand, he was just stood at the side without diplomatic at all. No matter what an outsider in his group said, and had nothing to do with Yi Futian and smile on his face. He stayed silently on the sideline, grudges in his heart, and completely did not partake that he was very shrewd. If Yi Futian was seeking reveal his emotions, he was not going to accompany him. Now, however, his strong intent to slay Yi Futian was enough to offend the people from top-tier factions in the Penglai continent. In the end, Yi Futian had to pay for his own actions. Seeing the scene unfold in front of them, the onlookers also felt that Yi Futian was going to suffer. In a moment of rage, he acted too impulsively. Without sufficient strength, only death awaited him. 3 swords levitated just above Yi Futian's head. His vision focused on Jun Chuyan's silhouette that was right in front of him. He was certain that before the fight broke out, he could slay Jun Chuyan. However, if he did that, he would not enter the Eastern Deity Island and would be forced to leave. Furthermore, doing so may endanger Dongyuan Pavilion. Hypothetically, he could leave just like that, but Emperor Helian, the Beigong family, and the rest might be implicated. Thus, until necessary, Yi Futian would not take the risk to kill Jun Chuyan publicly. I promise you that before they can even act, you will die first, Yi Futian stated as he looked at Jun Chuyan. His tone made Jun Chuyan feel an intense level of confidence. It was as though Yi Futian was certain he could make good on his word to frown even deeper. That one sword strike earlier had already caused him to lose face. Yet Yi Futian had once again publicly humiliated him. Jun Chuyan was also an exceptionally powerful Renhuang. Nonetheless, he still received such humiliating treatment. With so many virtuosos around, Yi Futian still boasted that as long as his people acted, the person who will die first will be him, Jun Chuyan. Yi Futian obviously did not think highly of his abilities. It seemed that to Yi Futian, Jun Chuyan was someone he could easily stamp out like an ant. In fact, it seemed like it was below him to get into a fight with Jun Chuyan. Such arrogance. At the side of Jun Chuyan, 2 high-level Renhuang virtuosos locked their gaze on Yi Futian and scowled coldly. How dare Yi Futian ignore them? Did he treat them like they were just air? Yi Futian could kill Jun Xiuyan before they acted? Why don't you try? Jun Xiuyan replied in a similarly sarcastic tone. He did not believe that was possible. Go kill them, Jun Xiuyan icily ordered. In an instant, a terrifying storm of the great path exploded out and swallowed the entire space. At the same time, the 3 streaks of sword wool floating above Yi Futian's head emanated a sword aurora that pierced the clouds. Everyone please stop. At this moment, a voice echoed throughout the space. The voice had an ethereal character. It sounded out within the storm of the great path. And even so, everyone could hear it clearly. Many people were a little shocked that even at this point of the conflict, someone was trying to convince them to stop. Everyone shifted their gaze and saw a column of silhouettes cloaked in white approaching on air. Their white clothes fluttered in the wind. It was as though they were not of this world. They were all extraordinarily beautiful like deities. Indeed, they were the virtuosos of the Eastern Deity Island. The leader of the group of women was Bai Mu from the Eastern Deity Island. On the battlefield, the fearsome storm of the great path halted for a moment as Yi Futian and the rest turned to look at Bai Mu. Is anything the matter, goddess? Asked Jun Xiuyan as he lifted his head to look at Bai Mu. Could both of you, Master Jun and Master Yi, perhaps on account of the authority of the Eastern Deity Island, end things right here? Let us stop pursuing who is in the right or wrong, or this matter anymore. Bai Mu said as she looked at Jun Xiuyan and Yi Futian. Both of you are guests invited by the Eastern Deity Island. Furthermore, I was the one who personally delivered the invitation to both of you. Thus, Bai Mu does not wish to see both of you like this. The Eastern Deity Island has already opened. If any of you incur any losses, I will be at fault. Jun Xiuyan looked at Bai Mu. He thought that there was no need for Yi Futian to agree. From his point of view, Yi Futian was already a dead person. He believed that what Bai Mu wanted was for him to end things as they were, and spare Yi Futian his life. The Jun family has been maintaining law and order in the Penglai deity region for many years. I am sure you do not want to create so much unhappiness in this place. Tomorrow will be the opening of the Eastern Deity Island. Bai Mu wishes to see all her invitees enter the island. Bai Mu continued when she saw Jun Xiuyan hesitating. Naturally, she could tell the difference in abilities between the two parties. However, Yi Futian displayed a shocking amount of potential in this fight. She also did not wish for Yi Futian to die before even stepping into the Eastern Deity Island, and so she came. She hoped that Yi Futian could have a chance to enter the Eastern Deity Island. Seeing the determination in Bai Mu's eyes, Jun Xiuyan let his gaze sweep towards Yi Futian and coldly said, "Whatever happened today, I will definitely settle with you later. I'll let you live a few more days. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." Jun Xiuyan, and the rest turned around and left. As he walked past Bai Mu, he stopped for a short while. Since Goddess Bai has requested, I am certainly willing to give the Eastern Deity Island some face. However, I cannot guarantee that he can leave the Penglai continent alive, and I hope you can understand. As he finished, he continued walking off. The friend beside Jun Xiuyan also paused when he passed Bai Mu, smiled at her, and said, "What's the point in pleading mercy for him? It's not really worth it, is it?" Jun Xiuyan, and the rest turned around and left. As he walked past Bai Mu, he stopped for a short while. Since Goddess Bai has requested, I am certainly willing to give the Eastern Deity Island some face. However, I cannot guarantee that he can leave the Penglai continent alive, and I hope you can understand. As he finished, he continued walking off. The friend beside Jun Xiuyan also paused when he passed Bai Mu, smiled at her, and said, "What's the point in pleading mercy for him? It's not really worth it, is it?" Bai Mu remained silent. In the past, she also thought that Yi Futian was merely a puppet of ensuring his own survival. After all, what he was worried about was the Hellion family and his cultivation level was quite low. Yet they had also gotten themselves involved this time. Several practitioners had a higher cultivation level than him, to Jun Xiuyan's and some were even high-level like what he proclaimed. Under such circumstances, he could kill Jun Xiuyan would naturally think that Yi Futian had any real authority in Dongyuan Pavilion. He at least had this much confidence. However, what happened previously had changed her mind. After hearing Yi Futian's reply emanating from him, she did not have much to say either. That was the perfect grade divine wheel. Yi Futian was an extremely cocky person and powerful in an actual fight too. Resolve the issue disregarding the status differences. Perhaps Yi Futian would bring some surprises to the Eastern Deity stronger than Jun Xiuyan. She could only wait and see for herself. Might be able to gain a lie if he entered the Eastern Deity Island. If possible, the Eastern Deity Island could also accept him into their ranks. Looking at all the people gathered around, as this thought crossed her mind, tomorrow is the opening day of Eastern Deity Island. Telepathically spoke to everyone, please do not forget that. The Jun family is one of the top-tier factions on this Penglai continent into the empty space and commands an immense amount of power. The pandemonium finally died down with the deaths of some Renhuangs. It's not safe for you here. Many people sighed. However, tomorrow is the opening of the Eastern Deity Island. Those attackers wanted to kill Yi Futian and to reap some benefits on the Eastern Deity Island. And now, if I can speak on your behalf on the Eastern Deity Island. However, they could also understand. Her tone was very calm. Spoke, and even if Jun Qian as though she wanted Yi Futian's gratitude, he still had to give her some face. It seemed like she really wanted to help Yi Futian. After all, everyone also going to enter the Eastern Deity Island tomorrow, and the Eastern Deity Island was the territory of Bai Mu under such circumstances. Thus, Yi Futian even if help from others weren't too happy about the outcome. If the Eastern Deity Island were willing to help him, once he left, it would undoubtedly increase his chance of survival. He would continue to try to kill Yi Futian. All the virtuosos who had gathered did not leave. Instead, they looked at Yi Futian and his group. With practitioners from over 1,000 continents gathered at the Penglai deity region, it was expected that many things could happen. However, it was still rare for a practitioner to be so headstrong that he dared to kill members of one of the elite factions on the Penglai continent like Yi Futian did. Many people were quite curious about how Yi Futian would end up. "Let's go," Yi Futian said. Yi Futian and his group left from the crowd of people. It was only after they left that the virtuosos gradually dissipated. Quite a few people had an excited expression on their faces. It seemed like this trip to the Eastern Deity Island was going to be interesting. When Yi Futian and his group left the crowd behind them, Beigong Shuang lowered her head slightly, looked at Yi Futian, and whispered softly, "I'm sorry." Yi Futian was a little taken aback. He looked at her and asked, "Why are you apologizing?" "I implicated you," Beigong Shuang replied quietly. She didn't believe that she committed any mistake. Back on the Rain Deity Terrace, it was Jun Xiuyan who was brash. She only rebutted once, and didn't expect that her one rebuttal became a fuse for all the things that happened later, causing such a conflict to occur. "Everything's fine. You didn't do anything wrong," Yi Futian replied softly. Seeing the two of them in front of him, Beigong Ao sighed silently in his mind. No one understood his daughter more than he. Beigong Shuang put her heart and soul into cultivating, and had little experience with things outside the cultivation world. Even though her cultivation level may have reached the Renhuang stage, she was still too innocent. This conflict that happened would probably teach her a lesson that she won't forget. and let her truly comprehend the rules of survival in the world of cultivation. However, whether they could all harmlessly get out of this conflict was still difficult to tell. Hearing Yi Futian's reply, Bei Gongshuang remained silent. While she didn't do anything wrong, it was still true that they had been endangered. She wasn't that concerned about herself, but just now, even Helian Yu was about to be killed. There was also Yi Futian and the rest. They were all embroiled in this conflict. And Jun Shuyan didn't even bother trying to conceal his intention to have them all killed. "Don't worry. With me around, nothing will happen," Yi Futian spoke. His tone still reflected utter confidence. Even if Jun Shuyan really decided to use his family's influence and power, he would at most have to capture Jun Shuyan as a hostage. However, if things were to proceed to that stage, he would cause a great inconvenience to both the Helian family and Beigong family, because they would have no choice but to move their families to a different location. Yi Futian looked ahead as he spoke. Bei Gongshuang looked at the side of his face, and she sensed an extraordinary power from his calm voice. This type of power was not born of strength, but she wasn't sure what its source was either. No wonder her father told her that Yi Futian was the most outstanding individual he had seen in his life, and that she should learn as much as she could from him. Similarly, Beigong Ao sensed an impressive confidence from Yi Futian's tone. Perhaps Yi Futian could really create miracles. After all, he was the prodigy Ren Huang, who could cause the statue to reveal its divine presence. On this trip to the Eastern Deity Island, he might be able to do things that others couldn't. Furthermore, Bai Mu from the Eastern Deity Island had held out an olive branch to him. "Someone is watching us," Emperor Helian spoke. His brows were tightly furrowed, and he had a slightly worried look. Their stalker wasn't even trying to hide that he was observing them. Furthermore, his cultivation level was very high. His divine consciousness was constantly sweeping over them as he began monitoring their every move. A flicker of understanding flashed across Yi Futian's eyes. Jun Shuyan did not want them to leave the Penglai continent alive, so of course, he would dispatch someone to monitor them. There was no way he would give them a chance to escape. He closed his eyes, and wisps of terrifyingly strong sword chi trailed around his body. Up in the skies, the will of the great path became unimaginably fearsome, and in an instant, morphed into a streak of sword will. This streak of sword will sounded out like a bell, and emanated a deity-like halo. The surrounding people let out a shocked expression, and looked in his direction. In the next instant, they saw the streak of sword will fly out, at an incredible speed across space. With slaying as its only objective, it flew towards the source of the unwelcome divine consciousness, disregarding the distance to its target. Initially, that strand of divine consciousness was fearlessly sweeping across Yi Futian and his group. In the next instant, however, it sensed the terrifyingly sharp sword will. The wisp of divine consciousness morphed into a roaring beast, and pounced on the sword will but shattered with a splash, under the might of the sword will. A great distance away, an elderly man furrowed his eyebrows, his face ashen. Wisps of divine consciousness emanated from him. Yet that streak of sword will just pierced through all of them, like it was merely passing through empty space, utterly shattering all of them in the process. It was as though the sword will was the bane of the divine consciousness. Boom! An extremely strong will of the great path erupted from his body, morphed into a terrifying great path aura, and unfurled outwards. Only then was that streak of sword will stopped. In his mind's eye, it was as though he could see the sword, shrouded in an intense, threatening aura, pointing at him from afar. Then, the sword will flew back to where it came from. The old man opened his eyes, his face somber. He was actually threatened by a low-level Runhuang Jr. That low-level Runhuang erased his divine consciousness, forbidding his divine consciousness from peeping at them. Yi Futian did not care about what the old man thought. After unleashing that streak of sword will, the wisps of divine consciousness became a lot more well-behaved, and were far less fearless. They would only occasionally peek at their location to make sure that they didn't escape. A night passed by peacefully. The next morning was clear. The Eastern Deity Gate of the Penglai Deity region was the entrance to the Eastern Deity Island. At this place, the aura of deities swirled around. Above the eastern deity gate, an abundant amount of deity mist shrouded a large space. Many goddesses from the eastern deity island were standing in front. The entire scene was like a beautiful painting. It was a lot more bustling in front of the eastern deity gate. Numerous virtuosos were gathered there. With a glance, one could see practitioners everywhere. From the heavens to the ground and the vast continents were gathered, and most were practitioners at the Renhuang stage. One could imagine how grand the scene was. Yi Futian and the rest also arrived at the crowd. They completely did not stand out in the sea of humans, and were, in fact, swallowed up. Even Emperor Helian and Beigong Ao's hearts fluttered when they saw the impressive scene in front of them. It was still as spectacular as it was 10 years ago. There were way too many practitioners in the world, and the divine prefecture was way too vast. It was so big that even high-level Renhuangs like them were like a grain of millet in an endless ocean. Every 10 years when the Eastern Deity Island opens, exceptionally outstanding people will always emerge. This time, Pavilion Master might be one of them, Beigong Ao spoke. Among the practitioners from the various continents, many prodigies were filled with confidence. However, on the Eastern Deity Island, there were only a few who managed to emerge victorious and rise above the rest. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. At this moment, a row of silhouettes walked out from the ethereal aura within the Eastern Deity Gate. It was as though they appeared out of thin air. The leader of the group was a middle-aged beauty. She had an elegant air about her, a graceful figure, and carried with her the charisma of maturity. She gave off a chilly, arrogant vibe, as though it would be nearly impossible to become friendly with her. Her features set her apart from the crowd. She was at least on par with Bai Mu. Evidently, she was extremely beautiful. At this moment, a row of silhouettes walked out from the ethereal aura within the Eastern Deity Gate. It was as though they appeared out of thin air. The leader of the group was a middle-aged beauty. She had an elegant air about her, a graceful figure, and carried with her the charisma of maturity. She gave off a chilly, arrogant vibe, as though it would be nearly impossible to become friendly with her. Her features set her apart from the crowd. She was at least on par with Bai Mu. Evidently, she was extremely beautiful. She looked at the crowd around her and announced, "It has been 10 years already. The Eastern Deity Island welcomes everyone on the island." On the island, There are many great opportunities to further the cultivation of your great path in that direction. If you manage to capitalize on such opportunities, simultaneously you can keep what you have gained when you leave the island. Instantly, those with the Eastern Deity of over 100 may now enter the island into the territory of the Eastern Deity Island. Strong spatial ripples appeared in the Eastern Deity Island. Many virtuosos stepped forward one after another. The goddesses of the Eastern Deity Island were stationed at various positions around the gate and waited for the island. So long as they could produce the Eastern Deity token, they could bring their people entourage toward the Eastern Deity gate. In an instant, together, practitioners moved such a large group entering the gate their Eastern Deity tokens to the goddesses standing guard. Bai Mu glanced at the silhouette of his back. She understood that during that conflict everyone moved very quickly due to the immense size of the Eastern Deity gate and the presence of numerous goddesses who were standing guard to let Yi Futian go. At any point in time, did do that a large number of people could enter the gate at the same time. He was extremely unwilling. The mighty stream of practitioners decreased drastically in a short span of time. However, as it flowed she was not really that concerned about it. Let's go. After all, said, she had the Eastern Deity Island backing her. Yi Futian, even though his party left their spot, maybe a disciple of one of the top-tier factions on the Punlai continent, took out the Eastern Deity token and handed it to her. There were still a lot of virtuosos streaming into the island behind Jun Shiryan. Thank you, goddess. The number of people outside was decreasing continuously. He brought the 10 people into the Eastern Deity Island. The people who should enter the island had already spotted Jun Shiryan, and the ones who were waiting outside were mostly those who did not possess the Eastern Deity Island, and could only mighty group of virtuosos seeming like the goddesses of the Eastern Deity Island also gradually relaxed. Someone softly spoke. I wonder who will make the flowering tree bloom. Someone looked at the beautiful middle-aged woman and asked, Master, can we do in to take a look? The beautiful woman glanced at the situation outside, lightly nodded. Everyone leave a few people outside to wait. Yes, madam. Everyone smiled and nodded, and then also stepped into the Eastern Deity Gate. After Yi Futian and his group stepped into the Eastern Deity Gate, they immediately felt like they had arrived at a realm of deities in the land of mortals. The aura of deities swirled around, the sky was an azure blue, and the sea of the Great Path was clear and flawless. On the surface of the sea, one could see many islands. There was an island right in front of the crowd. However, there was no one on the island. Rather, there was only one tree. One island, one tree. The entirety of the island was this tree, a true towering ancient tree. Just one twig was as wide as a street. A couple of people could fit comfortably under one leaf. One could imagine just how humongous this tree was. On the towering ancient tree, numerous flowers were blooming. The flowering tree was also called the flowers of the Great Path by the practitioners on the Eastern Deity Island. The flowers fought for nourishment from the Great Path, and they bloomed for the Great Path. At this moment, many people proceeded forward and stepped up to the tree. A few people were even emanating impressive auras of the Great Path in front of the flowering tree. The flowering tree lived for the Great Path, and thus could sense auras of the Great Path from practitioners. So this is the legendary flowering tree. Helian, you muttered beside Yi Futian. She did not come the last time. So this was her first time entering the Eastern Deity Island. And it was also her first time seeing the flowering tree. Emperor Helian nodded his head. In the legend, it is said that the flowering tree blooms for the Great Path. On this flowering tree, there are 8,000 flowers. And these flowers can accurately detect a practitioner's potential on the Great Path. Different people will receive different reactions from the flowers. Helian, you muttered softly. She wanted to give it a try. It is that miraculous? Yi Futian was quite curious. He looked ahead. There were already flowers blooming in the direction of the practitioners, who were walking towards the flowering tree. While the number of flowers that bloomed was not large, the flowers nonetheless blossomed beautifully. Beigong Ao nodded and said, the flowering tree was planted 1,000 years ago by the former master of the island, the supreme deity Donglai. It started blooming only after a couple of centuries. It is nurtured by the Great Path, and sits at the entrance to the Eastern Deity Island. In the legends, the supreme deity Donglai used the flowering tree to seek disciples. It is said that there was once someone who was an unrivaled genius in terms of cultivating the Great Path. He made all the flowers bloom, and tens of thousands of flowers blossomed. His potential on the Great Path was terrifyingly high, and thereafter, he became an extraordinarily strong figure. Then, after the death of the supreme deity Donglai, this flowering tree still stood at the entrance to the eastern deity island. Anyone who entered the island could measure his potential on the great path using the flowering tree, Beigong Ao explained to Yi Futian. Yi Futian looked ahead. He did not expect the flowering tree to have such a history. It was no wonder that those practitioners were fighting to get to the front of the flowering tree. They were hoping to make the flowers bloom. However, most of the people failed. The flowering tree seemed to be listless and bored. It was casually swaying its branches, and had not truly blossomed. If anyone wanted to cause some reaction in the flowering tree, and make the flowers of the great path blossom, he had to be an extraordinary person. Some people, on the other hand, was uninterested in all of these. Rather, they would stay focused on cultivating, and would not think that they needed the recognition of a tree. Do you want to give it a try? Helian Yu spoke to the Yi Futian beside her. He was the person who could cause the statue in front of the Dongyuan pavilion to reveal its divinity. She wondered how many flowers would bloom for him if he went up to the flowering tree. However, Yi Futian's expression seemed to be very calm. He seemed to have little interest in this. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. At this time, there were exclamations among the crowd. Many looked at the flowering tree in front of them, and their eyes betrayed the slight perturbation they felt. Above the flowering tree, there was a figure standing on top of the ancient tree. Suddenly the flowering tree bloomed with countless flowers, as the currents of the great path flowed madly above the sky, and fell upon that man there, rendering the man with extreme brilliance, as if he was a descendant of the gods. At this time, there were exclamations among the crowd. Many looked at the flowering tree in front of them, and their eyes betrayed the slight perturbation they felt. Futian Pavilion above the flowering tree. There was a figure standing on top of the ancient tree and saw a group of cultivators, the flowering tree clad in luxurious clothing, walking towards the flowering tree. Flowed madly Many had recognized them, and
as
fell
those
upon
from
that
Chitian
man there,
Pavilion,
rendering
the
the
preaching
man with
holy
extreme
land that
brilliance,
belonged to Punglai
as if he was
deity
a
island.
descendant of the gods.
Chitian Pavilion.
The flowering tree is still in
heard
full
the
bloom.
murmuring amongst
Who
the
is
people
this?
around him.
Someone
Chitian
exclaimed,
Pavilion,
because
like
it was just
Dongyuan
too
Pavilion,
spectacular,
was the
all
holy
the
land
many
left by
branches
the
and
great
leaves on
emperor
the towering
divine
ancient tree
prefecture.
stretched toward
However,
the man.
Chitian Pavilion was the holy land left in the
It was as
Punglai
if the whole
continent,
world had turned
controlled
into a
and
world of
managed by
flowers.
all the main
Countless
principalities
many
there,
looked up at the man,
of which the
and
Chitian
many
dynasty
exclaimed
was
and
the
inquired
greatest
as to
and
whom
most
he might
powerful.
be.
This
However,
force
no one
overpowered
seemed
the
to know of
entire
him.
Punglai
Who are
continent,
these people?
so that even the
Jun
Jun family
Xiuyan
looked
looked
at the
Jun
man
Xiuyan came
and
from
the
was
group of
lesser by
people that were
comparison.
following behind him.
Chitian dynasty
He didn't
took
know
charge
any
of
of
them.
Chitian Pavilion.
Everyone around him
and
shook their
selected a
heads
group
and
of top
said,
competitors to
Supreme
cultivate
deity
there,
Donglai was
and
someone
they were
who
known
enjoyed
as
great
Chitian
fame in
Pavilion
Donghua domain
cultivators.
back in the days.
Those who set foot
Every
onto
time
the
ancient
ancient
deity
flowering
island
tree at
opened
this
up,
moment were
some
these cultivators
cultivators
from far away
the
would
prince
come.
of Chitian dynasty
Some kept quite a
run
low
Huang's
profile,
sixth realm,
and this man might be
Beigong
of the
Ao
same
whispered
likeness.
as Futian nodded.
Jun Xiuyan
It
nodded
seemed that
slightly.
Beigong Ao
He had heard
some
about
understanding
that
of the forces
judging from
inside
the blooming
Punglai
of this
continent.
flowering tree.
The figure that
It
was
might
standing
yield
at the
thousands
highest
of
point of the
flowers,
flowering tree,
which would be quite a
was
sight.
the prince of
The
Chitian
goddesses
dynasty.
of Eastern Deity
He was
Island
dressed in a
who came in
gorgeous
through
robe,
Eastern Deity
majestic
Gate,
and noble,
were asking
at
each
the
other
peak of
about the
middle
identity
Renhuang.
of the man.
The release
But
of his
still,
aura of
no
the
one
great
knew.
path had made
The
the
flowering
flowering
tree
tree
blossomed
blossomed with
brilliantly
thousands
in
of
divine
flowers.
glory.
Its
But
luscious
still,
beauty had
they were
stained
not
the
as
sky with
gorgeous
color.
as they had been before.
The man who was standing
lore
on top
spoke
of
of
the
108,000
flowers
in bloom.
It was as
But
if he
that
was
previous
surveying all the
cultivator had
mountains
only yielded
standing
more than
there on the
10,000
ancient
flowers.
The young
And at
man
the moment,
turned his back to
the
the
prince
others.
of Chitian
He
dynasty
deeply felt the
had only
aura of the
achieved a
flowering
bloom of a
trait.
few thousand
It
flowers.
was as if it was in tune
As for
with
the
the
other
way of the
cultivators
world,
from Chitian
befitting
Pavilion,
its reputation
there
as
were
a
even
miraculous
fewer,
ancient tree.
as not many
He
flowers
lifted
were
his
flocking
feet
toward them,
and walked forward
on and off,
as
there
those
were
who
people
followed
who stepped
behind him
forward
left
to
with
try,
him in the
but no
direction
one
of
could surpass
Eastern
the
Deity
young man
Island.
before.
After
I'll
he
give
left,
it a try.
some other people
Beside
flickered
Futian
toward the
and the
flowering
others,
tree.
someone now walked
However,
forward. No one
it was
could achieve
Beigong
such a
Shuang.
grand gesture
She was
again
curious
as he did,
about her own
as if he
potential
had
of
been
the
the
great
most
path.
successful of those
Yi
who
Futian
tried.
was about to leave, but when he saw Beigong Shuang went over there, he stopped again and looked over yonder.
Come on, said Yi Futian as he trailed behind Beigong Shuang. It's them. Many people recognized him because of the previous conflict between Yi Futian and Jun Xiuyan. Beigong Shuang seemed to be the woman who was almost killed on the spot by Jun Xiuyan's people. Let's go. Jun Xiuyan had an indifferent expression on his face when he saw Yi Futian and the others. Many expressed a look of interest when they saw Jun Xiuyan and his people. Could it be that they would continue also? Let's join
Many
in the
people
fun
from
together.
Punglai
Continent moved forward with them to the towering ancient tree with high spirits. Beigong Shuang was the first to step into the area where the ancient tree was located. She released the aura of the great path, and suddenly, the ancient tree swayed as many flowers bloomed toward her, covering her like a nymph. The blooming flowers of the great path she evoked were not much less than the likes, such as the prince of the Chitian dynasty. This meant that she had great potential of the great path, and that her perception and comprehension of the great path were far beyond ordinary Renhuang. Yi Futian was also a little surprised by it. It seemed that Beigong Shuang's talent in the great path was relatively stronger among all the Renhuang. Beigong Ao favored this daughter of his very much, and had always allowed her to concentrate on cultivation. And this was probably the reason why. Jun Xiuyan frowned and huffed silently. They walked straight forward and came to the flowering tree. Yi Futian had been on guard for their presence, and seeing Jun Xiuyan moving forward, they also followed him, as wisps of aura of the great path permeated the atmosphere. Jun Xiuyan stepped onto the flowering tree, releasing the aura of the great path from his body, perceiving the rich great path between the heaven and earth that existed here. In this instance, a clattering sound was heard, as an extremely brilliant radiance also bloomed at the same time and flooded the sky with it. Countless flowers blossomed at the same time, enveloping this space as if to swallow everyone within it. What's going on? Jun Xiuyan was stunned by this sudden turn of events. He felt the flowers that were blooming madly, and at first he was surprised, then a strong sense of expectation and excitement loomed in his heart. This strange occurrence happened when he stepped onto the tree. What did it all mean? Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the crowd was shocked to find that the entire flowering tree was shaking, and even the great island itself was trembling as the sea was roaring also. The atmosphere of the great path above the firmament rushed toward the flowering tree madly, so that even the towering ancient tree seemed to be greatly excited. wanting to lift up from the ground. Even the goddesses of Eastern Deity Island were stunned by this sudden sight. They had never beheld anything remotely like it ever, not even in the history of the past 1,000 years. They only knew that the flowering tree was supernatural. But at the moment, just what had happened to make the flowering tree so jubilant? Is it all because of Jun Xiuyan? They looked at each other, and then at Jun Xiuyan, who had just walked up onto the flowering tree. If so, Eastern Deity Island must carefully consider its relationship with the Jun family, and it would be in their interest to allow Jun Xiuyan to cultivate at Eastern Deity Island. Everyone was completely shaken by the magnificent sight in front of them. The whole Deity Island was moving, and the flowering tree of the Great Path seemed to have sensed something and wanted to break out from the sea, as countless branches and leaves now reached upward to the sky, overshadowing all those figures within its boundary. Everyone was completely shaken by the magnificent sight in front of them. The whole Deity Island was moving, and the flowering tree of the Great Path seemed to have sensed something and wanted to break out from the sea, as countless branches and leaves now reached upward to the sky, overshadowing all those figures within its boundary. Everyone who stepped onto the ancient tree was shrouded in branches and leaves, and so was Jun Xiuyan. There was a clattering sound as countless branches and leaves rushed toward him, and many flowers opened up at him, as if they had blossomed for him. At this moment, Jun Xiuyan could feel his heart bursting. Even though he was a cultivator in the realm of Renhuang, he could hardly contain the excitement in his heart. As a member of the Jun family, one of the top principalities of Penglai Deity Island, he was quite familiar with the lore of the flowering tree. The flowering tree was an ancient tree of the Great Path, and as such, its perception of the Great Path was quite sensitive. Generally speaking, the stronger the comprehension and affinity of the Great Path exhibited by a cultivator, the more welcoming the flowering trees would be, so that it would also imply the achievement of the cultivator in the Great Path was higher. Now, when the flowering tree reacted so strangely when he got here, how could he not take it as a sign and be excited? As the young master of the Jun family from Penglai Deity Island, he had his ambition. Divine Prefecture was too vast, and Penglai Deity Island was only one of the continents in the Donghua domain, and not even a top-level continent at that. If he could be recognized by the flowering tree and have the flowers blossoming for him, then the forces of Eastern Deity Island might be helpful to him. And with his talent in the Great Path, he may yet go further in the future, such as to the main city of Donghua domain, and then on to the vast world beyond after that. Jun Xiuyan's heart was throbbing as he faced the blossoming flowers, expecting them to come toward him. But at this moment, as the clattering sounds were heard, the branches and leaves of the flowering tree passed beside him, just as those blossoming flowers also sailed past by him, bypassing him without welcoming him, nor did they bloom upon him. It seemed that the movement of the flower tree was not because of him. This sight caused Jun Xiuyan's fiery heart to cool down instantly, as if he had overjoyed over nothing. Extreme disappointment was akin to falling from cloud 9 in an instant. But as more and more branches and flowers bypassing him, hope, he became hopeless and gradually regained his senses, as he realized that the flowers were not blooming because of him. When the flowers were in full bloom, someone as proud as Jun Xiuyan would naturally consider himself as the cause of it because of his innate pride and desire. However, he did not completely lack self-awareness. He knew that even with his outstanding talent, he was not unparalleled, far from unprecedented in all of Penglai continent. When he cooled down, many things became clear to him. However, if it was not because of him, then for whom was the flowering tree moving? Quite a few cultivators were traveling with him, including some powerful cultivators from Penglai continent. But as far as he knew, none of them possessed such talent. So who could it be? He turned his head, but he was inside the space of the ancient tree, and his vision was blocked. He was already wrapped within, and couldn't see anybody else. Even his divine consciousness could not break through the covering of the ancient tree. It couldn't be him, could it? A thought flashed through Jun Xiuyan's mind, but this thought was like a thorn that made him feel extremely uncomfortable. So he instantly cast it aside. How could it be possible? If he was so outstanding, he wouldn't be here on an unnamed land. He didn't want to think about the possibility of it. Jun Xiuyan didn't want to speculate, but Beigong Ao immediately thought of Yi Futian. Emperor Helion had always thought of him as an old fox. And indeed, he was good at assessing any situation, and he was extremely accurate in his calculations. For example, he was certain that Emperor Helion and his cohort could not get a hold of Lu Han, so he decided to stay neutral. That way, he could reap all the benefits from Lu Han without having to get involved. In the end, when Emperor Helion would not succeed in his scheme, and Lu Han remained as the pavilion master, there would only be gains and no loss for him. But when Yi Futian appeared, he made a swift decision and repositioned himself. Later, there were those who wanted to alienate his relationship with Yi Futian. Not only did he not hold a grudge against Yi Futian, on the contrary, but he also sent his favorite daughter Beigong Shuang to get close to Yi Futian. He had already reached a conclusion as Emperor Helion, but he did even more than Emperor Helion by sending his people to Sunluo Manor. Therefore, at this moment, when there was a terrific change in the flowering tree, he thought of Yi Futian immediately. It was precisely when Yi Futian set foot here that the flowering tree began to move. Moreover, those endless branches and leaves and the blooming flowers swept in their direction and submerged them all in an instant. Of course, they were not blooming for him. Then he believed that all these happenings were because of Yi Futian. The reason why he was so certain was that Yi Futian had also achieved something that was unprecedented, which was the holy manifestation of spirit on the statue in front of Dongyuan Pavilion. Before Yi Futian, no one had done anything like it, so the master of the statue had appointed Yi Futian to be in charge of Dongyuan Pavilion. Beigong Ao speculated that Yi Futian was probably able to do it because he had resonated with the statue, which urged its hidden will. Manifestation of the Holy Spirit on the statue, the flowering tree bloomed for him. Beigong Ao thought, just what level is Yi Futian's talent? Why would someone like this appear in Dongyuan Pavilion? Could it be that he was a disciple of some supreme principality coming to the lower worlds for trials? Of course, Yi Futian himself was also aware of it. At the moment when he released the breath of the Great Path, he clearly felt the towering sacred tree on Eastern Deity Island seemed to be summoned, rushing toward him, and Yi Futian faintly felt the extreme excitement of the flowering tree. In a blink, the flowers bloomed in front of him, rushing toward him, seemed to be fighting for his favor. Not only that, but he felt that this gigantic flowering tree wanting to rush out and become one with his body. Could it be that the ancient tree of the world was a deity of trees? The flowering tree had sensed it, and thus its reaction? When the branches, the leaves, and the flowers interacted with him, his perception became extremely clear, and his divine consciousness was unhindered. He was able to perceive everything in this space through the flowering tree. He saw the location of Helion Yu and Beigong Shuang, and he also saw Emperor Helion and the others. No, this flowering tree is the sacred tree of Eastern Deity Island. If I take it away as soon as I come here, not to mention the reaction of people on the Eastern Deity Island, I will make myself a target for all these cultivators who had come here, Yi Futian thought. The last thing he wanted was to attract everyone's attention as soon as he entered Eastern Deity Island. These 1,000 or so cultivators, and the presence of so many mighty Run Huang would be troublesome for him. The aura of the Great Path surged in front of him, and at this moment, Yi Futian felt that the power of the Great Path was moving extremely smoothly, as if he could borrow from it. In an instant, the magnificent power of the spatial Great Path enveloped his body, and then the light of space went toward Emperor Helion and the others. Outside, everyone was still immersed in this shocking occurrence, watching the flowering tree trembling madly. But just then, the crowd saw that the flowering tree suddenly fell silent again, no longer excited. Then, the branches and leaves rolled back as the blooming flowers seemed to wither and closed up, and everything returned to its original state. In a few short moments, the flowering tree remained the same, without anything being unusual. Yi Futian and the others stood together. There was no aura released from Yi Futian's body, and the aura of the Great Path inside his body was imprisoned by him, preventing the flowering tree from perceiving it. The flowering tree was activated by the way, and if it could not feel the aura of the great path, it would naturally quiet down. What's going on? Many people questioned. Exact what had happened? Could it be that everything that had happened before was just an illusion? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Impossible. Bai Mu and the other cultivators of Eastern Deity Island were shocked by what they saw. Although the flowering tree had become still, its leaves and branches still swayed, giving off a rustling sound. It seemed sad, as though it had been abandoned. Even though those cultivators were still there, the flowering tree seemed to ignore them. Impossible. Bai Mu and the other cultivators of Eastern Deity Island were shocked by what they saw. Although the flowering tree had become still, its leaves and branches still swayed, giving off a rustling sound. It seemed sad, as though it had been abandoned. Even though those cultivators were still there, the flowering tree seemed to ignore them. This situation was unheard of. They were all Even wondering
those who had
who the
cultivated
person hidden
at
in the
Eastern
crowd
Deity Island
who had made the
had
tree
never
act
heard of such a
strangely
thing
had been.
happening.
And why had
Someone
he
is
hidden?
deliberately hiding.
Moreover,
Came
there
a
had been
voice.
someone else there
One of the
before that
goddesses was
person.
speaking.
Someone
A strange look
enchanting and
came over
mysterious
everyone's
who had made the
faces.
flowers
They
bloom.
had guessed this as
He
well.
must also have
They
been an
looked up at the
extraordinary
figures
person.
above the flowering
No
tree.
matter what the people who
However,
had come behind
they
them
were all
like,
covered in the
there were
radiance
those
of
among
the
the
great
cultivators,
including
who had come to
Futian.
Eastern Deity
A halo
Island,
revolved
who
around
were
him,
crouching
flashing
tigers
brilliantly.
and hidden dragons.
He stood upon
Could
the
it
black
be him?
wind condor's
A thoughtful
back,
look came
looking
over
left
Bai
and
Mu's
right.
face.
With a
She
single
looked off
thought,
into the distance,
the black wind
thinking
condor
of
flapped
one
its
person
wings
only,
and flew forward,
Futian,
taking
that man
Beigong
was
Shuang
incredibly talented,
and the others away
when
from
he
the
had clashed
flowering
with
tree.
Jun Chuyan
Everyone
previously.
else looked all
She
around
had
them,
discovered that
but
his
they could not
divine
find
will
the
was
reason
perfect.
why.
And
And
he
did
was
not know who it
extremely
was.
cruel and
But
decisive,
among them was hidden
showing
an
no
immensely
mercy to his
powerful
enemies.
figure.
He had
Each of
even
the cultivators strode away
people.
from that place.
Yi Futian's
It
talent
seemed
was
that they would
beyond
not
any
be able
doubt.
to find who it
So,
was.
could he have been the
Jun
one who was
Chuyan
hiding
watched Yi
himself?
Futian
Yi
and the
Futian had
others
been there in
as they
front of the
disappeared off
flowering
into
tree,
the distance,
alone with
a
Jun
cold
Chuyan
light flashed
and
in
the
his
others.
eyes.
Moreover,
Full of murderous
judging
intent.
from Yi Futian
He did not
and
want to
Jun
guess
Chuyan's
whether
power,
or not it had been Yi
Futian was a
Futian.
little bit more
But Yi
outstanding.
Futian had left
So,
Eastern Deity
it was
Island
more
alive.
likely to be Yi Futian.
Let's go.
He
Thinking
walked
of
away
this,
as well.
Another thought
Behind,
came into her
some
head.
people were walking
It seemed
onto
like
the
when she had
impossibly
asked
massive
Jun
flowering
Chuyan
tree
to let Yi
but
Futian
no
go
brilliance appeared
and have
like
a
it had
chance to
before.
come to Eastern
The
Deity
tree had
Island.
become still again.
She had done the right
as if
thing.
it was too lazy
Now,
to move.
Yi Futian was
it was
here,
as if no one
and he
could
was
get the
possibly
flowering
the one
tree
who
to
had
bloom
been
for them.
hiding. This
If it
made
really
looks
was
of
him,
fury come
she
over
would
the
implore the
faces
people
of the
of the island
cultivators
to
who had been
protect him.
behind.
In fact,
They were
she might
extremely
not need to
unhappy
say
with this
anything.
turn of events.
The island would
They
not
felt
let him
like they
come
were
to
being
harm.
looked down upon
Let's
by
go.
a tree.
Her figure
But there was
flashed
nothing
as
they
she
could
left,
do.
moving
It
forward.
was not like they could
The
attack
others
a
followed
tree.
her.
They could
Yi
do
Futian
nothing
did
but
not
leave
think
in a
too much
huff.
about it.
This made
He
it
had
so
just
that the
not
people
wanted
who
to
were
become
even
the
further
target of
behind
public criticism
were not even willing
he
to
didn't
go up
bother
to the
to
tree.
expose
They
himself.
just walked on by.
As for whether or
not
not
willing
Eastern
to let the
deity
tree
islands
despise
thought highly
them.
of him.
Soon,
He
the vast
basically
group
didn't
of
care.
cultivators had all
Now
left.
he just wanted to
The
see if he would
cultivators
have a
of
chance
Eastern
to
deity
increase his
island
power
watched
on
everything
Eastern
in a
deity
daze.
island.
They
There
felt
was
like
not
they
just
were
a
in a
single
dream.
island in
This
the
was
area of
completely
Eastern
different
deity
than the
island.
way it had always
Rather,
happened
it was an
before.
archipelago. The ocean here in this wonderland was vast, and mist filled the air. It was like a magical sea. Upon this mystical sea stood mystical isles. Each one was different, and they each gave off powerful auras. In the past, the supreme deity Donglai had been the greatest figure, and was skilled at alchemy. He had created a world here that was considered by many to be a true holy land for cultivation. There were many methods used in Eastern Deity Island in powerful alchemy. When the supreme deity Donglai was at the height of his power, many people had come here to study medicine. Many of them wanted to study under supreme deity Donglai. At that time, Eastern Deity Island was the absolute king of the mainland. There were not other top powers.
At that moment,
like Penglai
Yi
Deity
Futian
Island
looked
was
off into
today.
the distance.
What is that?
He saw that one of the islands was covered by terrible lightning and suffused with lightning will. Even from a distance, he would still clearly feel the power hidden there. At that moment, many cultivators were already heading towards the island and standing outside it.
It looks like a person, said Yi Futian, shuddering as he looked at the island. The endless lightning will flowed, forming what looked like a human figure. It looked like a god of lightning, standing there above the island with waves of lightning will sweeping out from it off into the distance. All the people standing near could clearly feel the hidden killing power in that lightning will. It seemed like they would be directly wiped out by the wave of lightning will. The whole island seemed to be covered by the god of lightning. The figure thrust its arms forward and slammed them down into the island, forming a destructive curtain of lightning that covered the island.
There is a tablet there, said Helian Yu. She looked at the lightning-covered island. One side of the island was 1,000-foot-tall cliff, smooth as if it had been cut off by lightning. It had formed a huge tablet into which characters had been carved. Those were left by a powerful figure. In the past, many people came here to learn about medicine from Supreme Deity Donglai, but he would not give them the knowledge for free. Thus, those who came had to pay a price. Thus, many ruins of holy lands appeared upon Eastern Deity Island, left behind by those top figures who had come here to learn about medicine, said Emperor Helian. Yi Futian and the others continued forward. They saw that there were many people standing before the cliffside tablet, floating in the air and looking at the characters. A history was carved there, recording the story of a powerful figure who had come to learn about medicine and had left behind the will of a lightning god. No wonder Eastern Deity Island is so enticing, said Yi Futian. When Supreme Deity Donglai was here, the island must have been even more magnificent. Said Emperor Helian, nodding. It was a true holy land. Countless cultivators strove to be the first to come here, but it was very difficult to get in. There was a very high bar to entry. Those who were not geniuses could not enter. Unfortunately, Eastern Deity Island has declined since the fall of Supreme Deity Donglai. It has been hidden on this island for many years, and only opens once every 10 years. Who is the master of Eastern Deity Island now? Asked Yi Futian. Emperor Helian and Beigong Ao both shook their heads. We do not know, but Eastern Deity Island has been gathering its strength for many years. Now we don't even know how powerful they are. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. What is that? At that moment, someone was looking towards the center of the island. There was a straight and tall tree within the endless lightning right beneath the lightning god, flashing with purple thunder light. When the lightning will fell upon it, it was completely engulfed. What is that? At that moment, someone was looking towards the center of the island. There was a straight and tall tree within the endless lightning right beneath the lightning god, flashing with purple thunder light.
When the lightning will fell upon it, it was completely engulfed. That is a thundercloud tree, someone whispered, his eyes fixed sharply upon the tree. It is indeed, but it has changed. It has transformed into cloudwood. Cloudwood? Yi Futian heard the discussion going on beside him, and looked towards Emperor Helion and Beigong Ao questioningly. A thunder elemental divine item, said Beigong Ao. 10 years ago, the thundercloud tree had not completely matured into cloudwood, but now that 10 years have passed, it has. Now that there is cloudwood there, I wonder who will be able to get it. There was a look of excitement in his eyes. Obviously, he wanted to be the one to get it. A thundercloud tree was a divine tree of lightning, and they were extremely difficult to grow. They could only grow under the power of the great path of thunder, and it took hundreds of years to become cloudwood. They had to be tempered in the natural power of the great path of thunder, for centuries, in order to produce this thunder elemental divine item. Once the cloudwood was produced, it was extremely valuable, especially to cultivators who cultivated thunder elemental power. It was a divine item to help them understand the power of the great path of thunder more deeply. It was even comparable to top-level ritual implements when used in combat. It gave you the power to control thunder and increased the power of the great path of thunder. So much cloudwood could only have been formed by an entire thundercloud tree that had been growing for many years. It was probably more than 100,000 years old. Supreme Deity Donglai had fallen many years ago, but there were traces of him left in many places here. This meant that this tree may have been formed of the thunder will of someone who had come here to learn about medicine, while Supreme Deity Donglai was still here, so that he could produce a powerful thunder artifact. But he himself had not made it to this day. However, as the cultivators all stared at the cloudwood, their eyes burned with desire. They couldn't wait to get their hands on it right away. Its value in their eyes was greater than 9th-tier ritual implements. At that moment, many of them had already stepped forward towards the area filled with lightning. But the lightning there was terrifying, and some of them were knocked back as soon as they stepped within with lightning swirling around their bodies. Some of them were even burned black by the lightning. Boom! Beside Yi Futian and the others, a cultivator was sent flying backward, spitting up blood. His body seemed to have cracked, revealing lines of blood. There was a miserable look on his face. Many powerful cultivators had appeared before the island, and many of them cultivated the power of the great path of thunder. That was why they had rushed over here. Many of those who did not cultivate the great path of thunder had directly left. They did not want to waste any more time here. They would rather go elsewhere to find better opportunities. Amid Yi Futian's group, Beigong Ao and Beigong Shuang both cultivated the power of the great path of thunder. Thus they were not willing to leave. They stared at the cloudwood, but there were so many cultivators here. If they wanted it, it would not be easy to get. Although some people had been knocked back, those who had already cultivated to high levels could enter. They were trying to get through the field of lightning to reach the center and obtain the cloudwood. These people did not come here 10 years ago, said Beigong Ao looking at them. Why do you say this? Asked Yi Futian. No one can go right inside, said Beigong Ao. The whole island is covered by the great path of thunder. It contains the powerful will of the powerful person who came here to learn medicine from Supreme Deity Donglai. Who of the cultivators here could withstand the mighty will of someone of that level? Yi Futian naturally understood this. He looked forward. This mystical place within Eastern Deity Island was extremely suitable for cultivating. Forcing one's way in would be meaningless. Those cultivators probably saw the cloudwood, and their hearts were filled with greed, so they wanted to go right in and take it. But it would probably require one to resonate with the will of the great path that had been left behind by the great figure to get the cloudwood. Beigong Ao looked at Yi Futian, his eyes burning. Why are you looking at me like that? Asked Yi Futian. He didn't mind Beigong Ao looking at him. He was used to people looking at him. But the way he was looking at him made him feel a little strange. Why don't you try? Said Beigong Ao. Yi Futian was the one who had made the statue display its holiness. And not long ago, he had thought that the flowering trees' movements were because of Yi Futian as well. Given that, the will of the great path of thunder down below them should be nothing. All right, said Yi Futian with a nod. He had thought this as well. Since the cloudwood was that precious, he would do all he could to help Beigong Ao get it. It would help Beigong Ao's cultivation. Perhaps he would have the chance to advance to the next level. Not far away from them, other cultivators were starting to try as well. Among them, many were just like Yi Futian and the others. They had come from teaching forces on the mainland. Yi Futian looked forward, his eyes becoming extremely bright. It was as if they could see the flowing traces of the great path. Everything became very clear and natural. At that moment, that which Yi Futian sensed, and that which he saw seemed to become two different worlds. He felt the might of an extremely powerful thunder god's punishment, mighty as a stormy sea. He groaned and could not help but take a step back. The power of thunder swirled around him, and his face had gone pale. So strong, Yi Futian said to himself. The will of the great path that the great figure had left behind was terrifying. When he could fully perceive it, he would have to withstand the full brunt of it when it fell upon his senses. My lord! Beside him, Beigong Ao was shocked and stepped forward in a panic. He was worried that Yi Futian had come to some trouble. This seemed like something that had never happened before. I'm all right, said Yi Futian, motioning for Beigong Ao to step back. This was completely normal. The reason he had not experienced this before was that the flowering tree had not attacked him. He had just perceived the great path and absorbed its power. He continued forward, coming to the stone wall once again. Everyone beside him was looking at him, their eyes full of scorn. He had not even been able to withstand a single instant. A pavilion lord, someone whispered. Such a young pavilion lord was a rare sight. The person who had spoken said to Yi Futian, You will not be able to pry out the ancestors will so easily. If you are not high enough level, you shouldn't even try. Be careful, or you will get hurt. Yi Futian swept his gaze over him, then turned and smiled, saying, Don't trouble yourself on my account. On saying this, he once again entered his previous state. In a flash, he could see the picture before him had changed in his perception. He could see the image of an incomparably terrifying thunder god standing in the air, reaching out its hand and drawing in all the true thunder power in the area and sending it downward. In an instant, terrible thunder waves swept out, shattering everything. The thunder waves followed the rhythm of the great path. They overlapped in an extremely profound and complicated manner. Yi Futian suddenly realized that what had been left behind here was a kind of thunder law power. Perhaps this was part of the trade. The person had come here to learn from Supreme Deity Donglai, and thus had needed to leave something behind. Once Yi Futian realized this, his divine consciousness shot out, trying to mold itself to the will. This produced a certain resonance. Gradually, he began to be able to feel the thunder attack more clearly. Elder, said Yi Futian to Beigong Ao. Lines of the light of his divine consciousness shot out from his mind, resonated with Beigong Ao's. Beigong Ao knew Yi Futian was helping him. Although he knew this, and blood flowed from his mouth, transmitted his understanding to him. He felt greatly shaken. He seemed to have fallen into a trance-like state. He was a cultivator of the great path of thunder, and had a deep understanding of thunder methods. When Yi Futian did this, it was as if he had suddenly seen the sun in the sky. Everything became very clear to him. Beigong Ao continued forward, entering right into that area of thunder. This scene made Beigong Shuang rather nervous, and worried that an accident would happen. Everyone looked surprised. Beigong Ao had actually managed to make it in, making them all feel a little bit threatened. After all, Beigong Ao's level was much higher than Yi Futian's. He was an upper-level Run Huang with a 7th-tier divine wheel. Emperor Helian watched this scene unfold, then looked at Yi Futian beside him. He sensed that Yi Futian was doing something that allowed Beigong Ao to move forward, step by step. Would he really be able to get the cloudwood this time? Thinking of this, Emperor Helian was rather moved. When he had asked Yi Futian to take the position of Pavilion Lord of Dongyuan Pavilion, he had never thought that anything like this would happen. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian was still immersed within the thunder law power, and at the same time, he was also sharing his perception and interpretation with Beigong Ao. The more he perceived, the more he realized just how powerful the thunder method was. People who had reached the peak of their cultivation had synthesized their power of the Great Path, an art of attack, perfectly together, and transformed it into the supernatural art of supreme attack. Its power was frightening. Yi Futian was still immersed within the thunder law power, and at the same time, he was also sharing his perception and interpretation with Beigong Ao. The more he perceived, the more he realized just how powerful the thunder method was. People who had reached the peak of their cultivation had synthesized their power of the Great Path, an art of attack, perfectly together, and transformed it into the supernatural art of supreme attack. Its power was frightening. Since this person who had reached the peak could actually reach the Eastern Deity Island seeking a divine pill, with just a strand of his will, the law power that he left behind was most certainly abnormal. As such, it was incredibly powerful. Within his mind, Yi Futian felt as if he saw the mighty person release an attack. The attack was a concentration of incredibly strong power of the Great Path. The energy concentrated on his arm, combining his and created a resonance with the space around it. And understanding of the war god of the bundle of energy was had not even reached this level before, creating a devastating wave of thunder. Only just got here, as if some thunder, but his understanding of the will was still gradually getting stronger. That could hit a wide area. It was no wonder that he was considered a genius. Moreover, the attack was in the form of a manifest. It looked a little like the true will of waves of the war gods. Was still sensing the mightiness of the law power. When the thunder punishment power struck its target, continuously inside the point of impact would be instantly destroyed. However, and under the powerful will, the great path wave would engulf everything turn into beams of light converging at another point. And those beams of light of power was immensely frightening. Subsequent power. As such, it was actually kind of similar to when he mastered the sword resonance would form around the surrounding area. Beams of the great path of thunder, everything within, which had condensed into the light of stone wall, noted that the art of attack hidden within this strand of will. It was as if the frightening power of great path had condensed into the power of thousand punishment. His mental will bore a mighty pressure. When he was perceiving and interpreting the will, in an instant later, it felt as if the power of thunder was an incredible amount of energy was generated. Apart from that, punishment, an endless stream of the great path of thunder energy flowed all around his body. Rumbling sounds could be further inside, great path of thunder energies. He was also feeling a strong pressure transforming into a ray of thunder will, body radiated, like the light of thunder punishment. Subtle and interesting connection straight from above the thunder zone within this space. This left a curious expression on Yi Futian's and understanding. To release the art of thousand punishment, this was not the first time that he had come here. Just how much great path of thunder did one have to master to do that? Moreover, even mastering the light of thousand punishment itself a challenging feat, however. The moment he sensed that a more frightening thunder might descended upon the island. A stroke of lightning appeared in the sky, as if a doomsday thunder tribulation had arrived. From afar, many people looked over towards them. Their hearts trembled as they saw the devastating scene in the sky. Someone has created resonance with the will of thunder on Thousand Punishment Island, thought the deities of the Eastern Deity Island when they saw the scene. Naturally, they were well aware of the reason why the phenomena occurred. In an instant, multiple figures flashed towards the location. Among those who stepped onto Eastern Deity Island, was there someone so powerful? To create a resonance with the will of Thousand Punishment Island in such a short time. Moreover, they remembered there was another divine item sealed away within the Thunder Domain on Thousand Punishment Island. Now would the item also see the light of day? It looked like they really had some hidden dragons and crouching tigers within their midst this time. One after another, figures headed towards them. While Yi Futian's perception and interpretation grew clearer and clearer, he did not move and remained standing outside. Instead, he left Beigong Ao by himself, to let him truly feel the will of the thunder. Moreover, since Yi Futian helped him, Beigong Ao also created a little bit of resonance with the thunder's will. Slowly, he had moved deep into the island, and he continued walking towards the cloudwood. Some of the others also walking inside looked toward Beigong Ao. Their brows furrowed together slightly. Based on current developments, it looked like Beigong Ao would emerge from the crowd and obtain the cloudwood. Rumble! Beams of thunder gods might descended from above. Walking inside the thunder domain, Baigong Ao moved forward toward the center of the island, while bathed within the light of thunder. He was not far away from the cloudwood. Some of the deities of the eastern deity island had arrived. They looked at Baigong Ao and asked, "Who is this person?" Many people shook their heads lightly. They did not know him. However, it seemed like he had created resonance with the will of the great path of thunder and was about to obtain the cloudwood. As expected, Baigong Ao reached the center and placed his palm on the cloudwood. In an instant, his body radiated with the rays of the divine light of thunder. They engulfed the area, and strokes of lightning shot out of his palm and flew all over the place, leaving bright and beautiful bolts of lightning in the sky above the eastern deity island, which attracted the gaze of many from afar. He got it. Even Emperor Helion was a little excited. Baigong Ao actually managed to get the cloudwood. He looked at Futian and saw that Futian was still surrounded by thunder and lightning. Even his eyes were filled with flashes of purple lightning, which made him look monster-like, but also divinely handsome. Emperor Helion knew full well the real strength of Baigong Ao. The reason he could reach this stage was naturally due to Futian's help. After obtaining the cloudwood, Baigong Ao did not immediately leave. Instead, he sat there and began to cultivate, allowing the light of the great path of thunder to shower over him. However, many people had already fixed their eyes on him and were waiting for him outside. The cloudwood was a pinnacle thunder treasure. Even high-order renhuangs would find something like that extremely attractive, particularly those who were adept at and cultivated in the power of thunder. As for these people who had come from many different continents, many of them were mid- or high-order renhuangs, so it was easy to know just how much they desired the cloudwood. "I am afraid we might have some trouble," Emperor Helion said quietly to Futian after seeing all the powerful cultivators around them. There were many opportunities once they stepped foot onto the eastern deity island. However, the people of eastern deity island would not intervene in any affairs or matters that happened on the island. They would observe but were not allowed to intervene. Now, having so many powerful cultivators coveting the cloud wood was definitely not a good thing. Once Baigong Ao left, he would become the target of many powerful cultivators. Unfortunately, they might ask him to hand over the cloudwood. By then, whether or not they could defend and hold on to the item was a problem in itself. The rumbling of thunder continued. Then, Baigong Ao actually began to refine the cloudwood. The cloudwood began to assimilate with him. Then, suddenly a frightening thunderstorm appeared in the sky above, and with Baigong Ao's body as its center, the great path of thunder began to grow stronger. Lightning filled the heavens and covered the entire sky. Emperor Helion had a strange expression on his face. Could it be that Baigong Ao was going to break through his shackles right then and there? The cloudwood gradually assimilated into Baigong Ao's body, merging into his flesh and bones. This made Baigong Ao's body respond to the great path even more, which triggered an extremely frightening great path phenomenon. Was this a great path opportunity? Futian was also a little surprised. While still busy focused on perceiving and understanding the will, he glanced at Baigong Ao. It looked like he no longer needed Futian's help. Baigong Ao's resonance with the will also grew stronger and stronger. Mastering the great path of thunder, thunder's might rumbled, and divine thunder descended from the heavens. From afar, many cultivators looked toward them. How long had it been since they stepped foot onto the eastern deity island? Someone had actually broken through the great path opportunity and was going to experience a breakthrough? Moreover, from the intensity, it did not look like the breakthrough of a lower renhuang. It was highly likely that it was a high-order renhuang. Upon reaching this plane, breaking through was incredibly difficult. Some people would fail to break through this plane throughout their lives. It was definitely a great path opportunity for them to encounter something like this shortly after entering the eastern deity island. This made many people envious. The eastern deity island was truly a land for cultivation. "He's going to break through," Emperor Helion said after seeing the great path of thunder aura still converging and growing stronger. He looked at the figure within the thunder domain admirably, tinged with a bit of jealousy. Why couldn't it have been him? They both came with Futian, But Beigong Ao was the one who encountered an opportunity. His heart was unbalanced. Nonetheless, this was a good thing for them. The Eastern Deity Island was already filled with hidden dangers. Now that Beigong Ao had broken through, he would become stronger. And thus, their self-preservation ability had also increased by a few notches. However, behind him, Yang Dongqing's expression wasn't so good. Previously, he tried to instigate the relationship between Yi Futian and the Beigong family. How could he be feeling good? Moreover, Beigong Ao breaking through meant that he had surpassed them by a mile. In their continent, Beigong Ao would become the strongest person. By the time they returned, the balance would be broken, and his influence would also plummet. Even if Yi Futian were out of the picture, the Dongyuan Pavilion would never be his. It would most certainly fall in the hands of Beigong Ao. How lucky, thought many of those who also coveted the cloudwood. Now the difficulty of snatching the cloudwood away had undoubtedly grown. Unless they were a cultivator who possessed a divine wheel of the eighth order, they'd have no chance. Yi Futian smiled, and continued with his perception and interpretation. Beigong Ao breaking through was naturally a good thing. They had become stronger, and he no longer needed to do many things personally. The great path of thunder descended from the heavens. The sky above the entire Eastern Deity Island was covered in flashes of lightning. The frightening powers of the great path of thunder shot towards Beigong Ao's body, baptizing his body and tempering his spiritual soul. Beigong Ao got out after some time, and the lightning and thunder in the sky above also dissipated. Beigong Ao strode out of the thunder domain. He looked at Yi Futian. A smile could be seen from his expression. He was naturally well aware that everything that happened was thanks to Yi Futian. Otherwise, he would never have had the chance to encounter this opportunity. In truth, he never would have imagined that he would break through his plane level. The perception and understanding of the great path of thunders will help him achieve this. But more importantly, it was the cloudwood. Congratulations, Elder, Yi Futian said with a smile. Apart from luck, it is all thanks to you, replied Beigong Ao laughing. I was even thinking about leaving the cloudwood to Shuanger. Who'd have thought I would use them all up? I am ashamed. Yi Futian laughed after hearing his words. Naturally, Beigong Shuang would never think much of it. She would only be happy if she saw her father experience a breakthrough. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Congratulations. Emperor Helion congratulated Beigong Ao. He was conflicted about Beigong Ao breaking through. Even though they both followed Yi Futian, they were factions from the same continent with similar strength. And even though they were friendly to each other, there was still hidden competition. Now Beigong Ao was going to become the strongest person on their continent. How could he not feel conflicted about it? Congratulations. Emperor Helion congratulated Beigong Ao. He was conflicted about Beigong Ao breaking through. Even though they both followed Yi Futian, they were factions from the same continent with similar strength. And even though they were friendly to each other, there was still hidden competition. Now Beigong Ao was going to become the strongest person on their continent. How could he not feel conflicted about it? Haha, a bit contrary to your belief, isn't it? Beigong Ao said to Emperor Helion with a laugh. Emperor Helion shook his head and smiled bitterly. Seeing his expression, Beigong Ao said, Relax, we're old friends. Whether I break through my plane or not, I will continue to follow the pavilion head in the future. This old fox, Emperor Helion thought in his mind. Just like he had guessed earlier, Beigong Ao had also detected a lot of things in advance, so he kept cozying up to Yi Futian. Even after breaking through and reaching the 8th plane level, he was not arrogant at all. He remained sufficiently humble and continued to butter up to Yi Futian. His old skin was truly very thick. He was going all out to ride Yi Futian's coattails. Even though Yi Futian's cultivation level was far lower than him, 8th plane, it was not considered the pinnacle in the divine prefecture. After all, there were too many powerful cultivators around. However, in terms of gradation, there were a lot of weaker people. It really depended on one's point of view. Looking at it through the lenses of the divine prefecture, the 8th plane was already regarded as a person with high stature. And if it were a continent, the person would typically be the strongest. Senior, please do not say that. The role of the pavilion head is not something I might not retain for a long time, Yi Futian said. The seat of the Dongyuan pavilion head was something that he had to let go of sooner or later. Now that
Otherwise,
if he were to rely on his own strength, he never would have been able to perceive and understand the will of the thunder.
The Dongyuan pavilion
enter the core domain
pavilion head
and
obtain
the cloud wood and refine
However,
even if
breaking
you were
through
to
his
go
plane
all
level
around
as a
the divine
result,
prefecture,
Beigong is right.
he could still
Being the
concurrently hold the
Dongyuan
Dongyuan
head
will
pavilion
not
head
impact
position.
pavilion head. Yes,
There is no
plans to
conflict
cultivate
there.
and train in
Moreover,
other places.
we can also
said
follow
Emperor
you around
Hellion.
to explore
Beigong
different
Ao
places,
had broken through,
said Beigong
but what
Ao.
about his great
His
path
success
opportunity?
in breaking through this
How
time
could he let
made
Yi
him
Futian
believe
run
in
away?
Yi Futian even
Let's
more.
put it aside for
Only
now
by following
and discuss
Yi
it at
Futian
another time. Would he be able to
said Yi
encounter
Futian.
opportunities
He looked around
that could
him
make him stronger
and
saw that many people were heading towards them. Many released their aura of the great path and fixed their gaze on Beigong Ao. If it weren't for the fact that Beigong Ao had broken through his plane, they might have already made their move. However, at that moment, most people did not dare to act hastily. After all, high-order Renhuangs over the 7th plane were incredibly rare. And among those, not many entered the Eastern Deity Island. My friend, the Cloud Wood is a divine thunder item. We all train in the power of the great path of thunder. Could you also let us have a taste of it? At that time, an elder came forward and spoke. The elder seemed very dominant and serious. His long hair fluttered in the air, and he looked very lively. His aura was incredibly powerful. When he spoke, his voice was as loud as a great bell, and it made the space around him tremble. Upon hearing him, many people stared at Beigong Ao. Now that someone had spoken out, the rest were happy to follow along. The legendary Cloudwood, who among those who trained in the law power of thunder would not want to experience it. The Cloudwood has already been refined by this one. I would have to apologize for not being able to do as you suggested, Beigong Ao said. Even if it has been refined, you can still get it out, right? The elder continued to speak. His voice rumbled, and it made the ears of many tremble and their blood boil. It has been completely refined and has assimilated into my flesh and bones, Beigong Ao continued. If the elder wants to see it, it is fine. Please observe. After that, Beigong Ao took one step forward, and in an instant, thunder flowed and surrounded the area around his body. Rumble, rumble, rumble. His body transformed into a body of the great path of thunder. Bright and blinding thunder light coursed through his body. The sky started to move again, and the boundless space, in that instant, transformed into a thunder domain, as if everything had become the power of the great path of thunder. Boom! Lightning struck from the sky above, covering and engulfing the sky. Numerous beams of thunder and lightning landed directly on Beigong Ao's body. However, they did not strike him. Instead, they made contact and were absorbed into his body. At that moment, his body had become a great path of thunder with his body, and his body had now become like a divine item itself. Such a strong aura. The expression on many faces changed. Even the elder also frowned. He felt the power emanating from Beigong Ao's body. The majestic power arising from the great path of thunder was unparalleled. Not only did Beigong Ao break through his plane level, but he had also refined and absorbed the Cloudwood into his body, making himself stronger as a result. Now that he had mastered the power of the great path of thunder, he was no longer someone who could be compared to a cultivator who had just broken through to reach the 8th plane. Crackle, crackle. A sharp and deafening sound emerged. Strokes of thunder punishment light descended from above. Beigong Ao extended his hand and, as if his arm had turned into the hat of the thunder god, he controlled the thunder domain. An endless stream of thunder flowed and surrounded his palm. He looked at the elder and said, The cloudwood has been refined into the great path. Does the elder wish to experience it? The elder squinted his eyes. Then he laughed and said, "It is no wonder it is regarded as the thunder divine wood. My eyes have been opened." After that he gave up directly. He turned around and continued to perceive and understand the will of the great path of thunder. He no longer harbored any thought of getting the cloudwood. Baigong Ao's strength increased significantly after he refined the cloudwood. From the thunder will might he displayed, if they had tried to snatch it away, it would have been difficult for them to make a profit. Their losses would definitely overshadow any profit made. After all, there were still many great path opportunities available on the Eastern Deity Island. The others also left one after another. None retained any intention of stealing or robbing Baigong Ao. Yi Futian looked around and said, "Let's go somewhere else." The others nodded and began to leave the area. The Eastern Deity Island has many islands. Do you guys know of any good place? Yi Futian asked. He wanted to get to a useful location directly. The Eastern Deity Island has a group of islands. Many places have great path opportunities. If we are talking about good places, apart from great path opportunities left behind by practitioners who came in search of medicinal pills, and the Eastern Deity Island itself, when Supreme Deity Donglai refined pills back in the day, he planted many unique plants on many islands. There are deity plants and poisonous plants. Moreover, they exist not only on a single island. Many islands were Supreme Deity Donglai's medicine gardens, Emperor Helion said. Yi Futian nodded. An alchemy master who was as strong and powerful as Supreme Deity Donglai was incredibly rare, even in the Divine Prefecture. Naturally, his actions could not be easily deduced using normal reasoning skills. Back then, Saint Jiang planted many medicinal herbs in the lower worlds. Hence, Supreme Deity Donglai's act of using islands to plant medicinal herbs was also considered normal. I remember Pavilion Head Yi wanted to trade for a Hell's Lotus last time. From what I know, there is a place within the Eastern Deity Island where Hell's Lotuses grow. There is even the legend of a Hell's King Flower. Inside this King Flower are many plants that contain the Great Path of Death, said Baigong Ao. When he spoke, he also glanced at Xiaqing Yuan. Yi Futian suffered a loss in the previous incident. It could be said that he was ridiculed by Jun Xiuyan. The conflict between them also stemmed from there. Moreover, the owner of the Hell's Lotus from last time refused to trade with Yi Futian because he was afraid of offending Jun Xiuyan. This incident was really disrespectful towards Yi Futian and Xiaqing Yuan. This incident remained engraved on Baigong Ao's mind. Furthermore, considering Yi Futian and Xiaqing Yuan's relationship, Baigong Ao mentioning this was naturally because he wanted to let Yi Futian win the heart of the beautiful lady. Wily old B** starred. Emperor Helion cursed in his mind. Why didn't he think of that? As expected, Yi Futian nodded immediately after hearing his. Then he said, "Let's go check it out." It was something that could help Xiaqing Yuan's cultivation. Naturally, they had to check it out. Moreover, since it was a medicinal herb that Supreme Deity Penglai planted, it was most likely something noteworthy. Okay. Baigong Ao nodded and led the way. They flashed across the sky at a ridiculous speed. Around them were many cultivators also flashing across the sky in search of their own opportunities. Within the Eastern Deity Island, there was an island filled with an incredibly powerful aura of death. One could say that an aura of the Great Path of Death engulfed the entire island. It was dark, gloomy, and extremely scary. Not many people went there. The island gave off a cold and eerie feeling. Moreover, the island was protected by very powerful demonic beasts. At that moment, many cultivators were already present on the Eastern Deity Island. People from different continents had arrived. Many practitioners of the Great Path of Death were also present. For these people, this island in particular was a must-visit place. For example, the practitioner who refused to trade with Yi Futian because of Jun Xiuyan was also there. At that time, he was already on the island. His gaze was fixed on a plant that grew on the island. Many practitioners like him were also present around him. However, none of them acted rashly or hastily. In front of the plant stood a frighteningly large beast that seemed to be protecting the area. A pair of cold and ghastly eyes scanned the sky. It was horrifying. The beast was a giant snake. A humongous giant snake over 100 meters long. A black mist emitted from its mouth. It was pitch black. A black mist that was surrounded by a frightening death aura that made one feel as if they would die and corrode away the moment they touched it. The plants around the giant snake were plants that contained the great path of death. No other plants were able to grow in that area. As a demon emperor level existence, the giant snake's intelligence was no different from a human practitioner. It had been guarding the area for many years. It relied on the island to survive, and it grew stronger and stronger. Everything on the island belonged to it. If these human beings wanted its things, it would devour and kill them. How about we team up and kill this giant snake? What say you? Someone asked. The others immediately agreed. Each of them had the same intention. The giant snake was at the demon emperor level. Many people had already been killed by it. By the time Futian arrived close to the island, he had already seen the frightening giant snake from afar, as well as a plant that it was protecting. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Eighth Plane Demon Emperor. Futian felt a heinous death aura and a powerful corrosive will immediately after he reached the place. It was a frightening place. Standing there meant that one was faced with the threat of being killed at any time. Eighth Plane Demon Emperor. Futian felt a heinous death aura and a powerful corrosive will immediately after he reached the place. It was a frightening place. Standing there meant that one was faced with the threat of being killed at any time. Underneath was an ocean of death. An ocean of death made up of hell's lotuses. Numerous hell's lotus filled the island, devouring all life on this land and engulfing that area with death. There were no other signs of life. Beside the demon snake was a gigantic black lotus. It had 9 petals. The pitch-black petals refracted a dark and gloomy light of death. The petals kept opening and closing, and each petal seemed large enough to hold 100 people. The lotus seemed like it was a man-eating flower. The giant demon snake slithered around the plant, protecting it and absorbing its power at the same time. King Hellflower. Hell's demonic lotus. Emperor Hellion mumbled. The weaker practitioners had to use the power of the great path
If a
to
normal
cover their
person were
bodies
to eat it,
in order
he
to
or she would
defend
die
against that
instantly.
gas.
The
The
person's
demon
life would be
snake had
corroded.
reached a cultivation
However,
level of
if a
the
practitioner
8th plane,
of the great
by the
path
time
of
it
death
absorbed
eats it,
all the powers
it is
on
an
the
incredible
island,
supplementary
it would have an
item
opportunity
instead.
to break
Of
through
course,
and reach the
even
9th
if it is
plane.
not mixed
By
and
then,
made into
it
a
would have a
pill.
chance of
The
getting
hell's
away.
demonic lotus
It would no
itself
longer be
is
shackled
also
on
an
that
immensely
island.
powerful
It
death
had been
plant.
stuck on that island
Yi
for
Futian
thousands
raised
of
his head
years.
slightly.
It had long grown
Naturally,
bored of the place.
he also saw the
guy who
practitioner
caught it
who
and
refused
refused
to
to
trade
trade
with
with
him
him
earlier
at the
But
Punlai
even
Deity
then,
Lake. The guy did
at
not
that
let
time,
it go. That
it used to
person had a
harbor
high-grade
thoughts of
Hell's
escape.
Lotus in his possession.
However,
Whenever it did
at the
escape,
moment,
there
it
was
would
an
have to
ocean
go
of
through a
Hell's
thorough
Lotus
beating
there.
after
It
being
was
caught and
incredibly
returned.
frightening.
It was
Moreover,
pitiful.
within
Later,
this
it
ocean
ceased
of
all
hell
thoughts of
flowers,
escape.
many of those
Instead, it
close to the
focused
Hell's
its energy
demonic
on
lotus
cultivating
were high-grade
It
lotuses.
would try to leave again.
They were similar
after
to
it
a
reached
level
the
7
ninth
ritual
plane.
implementer
After all,
higher. The
one
guy
could
who
only
caught it had
imagine
already died.
just how much
The
value was
Eastern deity
contained
island
within
should
this
no
ocean
longer
of
have
hell
any
flowers.
existence that
For a
exceeded the 9th
practitioner at the
plane.
high-order
So,
Runhuang
it
level,
would have an
it
opportunity
would be considered
as
an
long
immense
as it
wealth.
could reach the 9th
Yin
plane.
Daoren was the
However,
practitioner who
the
refused
Eastern
to
deity
trade with
island
Yi
would
Futian
open once
earlier.
every decade.
He also noticed
And a bunch
Yi
of
Futian's
foolhardy
presence.
people would come to
He
seek
glanced
their
in
death.
Yi Futian's
These
direction,
people were just
and
nice
his eyes
as
lit
they
up.
could be used.
Back
as
then,
these Hell's
he
Lotuses
disrespected Yi
fertilizers.
Futian.
They
by
provided
refusing
them with
to
a
trade
lot of
with him in
great
that
path
situation.
nutrition.
Now,
Because he
these
did not
people had
dare
also
offend
come to
Junqiu
their
yet.
death.
It was
Yi Futian
considered a
stared
type
at
of
the Hell's
ridicule.
demonic lotus.
He was aware that Yi
This
Futian
plant was
might remember
definitely of a
and
higher
not
grade
forgive him
than the Hell's
It
Lotus
looks like
in
I have to be
possession of
careful
the
here,
earlier thought.
trader.
If
It
you
should
still
be
intend
very
to
beneficial
stay,
to
I will
Xiaqin
have no
Yuan's
choice to
cultivation.
start a massacre.
Pavilion head.
The demon
I will
snake
go and
spoke
bring
in
it
a
to
human's
Xia,
voice.
said
When it
Beigong
spoke,
Ao.
turbid
He had
gas
just broken
exited
through
its
to
mouth
reach
when
the
it
8th
breathed.
plane.
The
It was a
turbid
good
gas
time to
filled
test
the
his
entire
strength.
area.
Moreover,
and made the environment
his
very
opportunity was given
uncomfortable.
by Yi Futian. It was natural for him to do something good for Yi Futian and try to win some favors with the head's partner. The demon snake glanced at Beigong Ao. A deathly aura emanated from its eyes. It was very scary. With one step, Beigong Ao moved forward. He stood in an empty space above the demon snake, and in an instant, lightning bolts rained from above and engulfed the entire island. Lightning bolts struck one after another, destroying and dispersing the miasma around. The power from the great path of thunder was the natural enemy of the miasma. Beigong Ao extended his arm and slammed his hand downward. In an instant, a gigantic thunderous palm that contained a frightening and destructive force converged and shot towards the demon snake. The demon snake let out a low growl and spat out a frightening death aura that covered the sky. However, Beigong Ao's body was covered by a light screen of thunder, which evil powers could not easily penetrate. The pitch-black scary demon snake was covered in a layer of black scales. It swung its gigantic tail into the thunderous palm. When they collided, an explosive bang shook the area, and the destructive thunder coursed through the gigantic tail, crushing the scales in the process. Blood appeared. Beigong Ao took another step, and numerous thunderbolts pierced through the sky and assimilated into his body. At that moment, Beigong Ao's body had a powerful pull as he devoured thunder. Above him, a humongous illusion of the god of thunder appeared. Rumble! Beams of light of thunder punishment emerged one after another. They hovered around Beigong Ao's body, making him seem like the war god of thunder. After witnessing the scene in front of him, Yi Futian knew that, after breaking through, Beigong Ao's grasp and understanding of the will of the Great Path was also quite profound. He was already able to use the art of thousand punishment. While he had not yet achieved the true power of thousand punishment, he was able to unleash a good portion of its power. Sharp and crisp crackling sounds could be heard as the power of thunder punishment shot downwards, tearing and crushing everything into pieces. Beigong Ao's body also suddenly vanished in thin air, as he transformed into a bolt of lightning. The next moment, the others present saw Beigong Ao appear in front of the demon snake. He raised his hand to deal a blow downward. In an instant, the demon snake was engulfed within the light of thunder punishment. The others could only see bolts of lightning striking the body of the giant snake one after another, tearing through its scales and slicing through its flesh. Blood spilled, and the demonic beast let out a roar of anguish. Its large body writhed around, and at that moment, the entire space shook violently. Death aura swept through the area. Do it! The other people began to move at the same time. They released their will might, and began initiating attacks targeting the demon snake. However, their eyes were fixated on the hell's demonic lotus that the demon snake was protecting. That was their true objective. The demon snake was pushed back by many great path attacks. Then multiple figures, at a ridiculous speed, shot straight towards the hell's demonic lotus. They were all as fast as lightning. Futian remained standing in midair. When he saw many cultivators charge downward at the same time, he raised his brow slightly. He glanced at the demon snake and saw that its eyes were filled with a chilling aura. It was as if it was mocking these greedy humans. Careful, Futian reminded Beigong Ao through voice transmission. Beigong Ao's movement stopped for a split second, and in the next moment, the others had gone past him. Each of them extended their hands in an attempt to grab the hell's demonic lotus. The moment their palms reached the hell's demonic lotus, the ocean of flowers in the area began to move at the same time. Like the Juyo hell, all the hell's lotus blossomed in a frenzy, devouring the entire area. Heck, there were even hell's lotuses in the sky. In the area of the flower ocean, giant petals began to grow one after another. After that, they shot straight towards the sky. 9 petals opened up at the same time before snapping shut, trapping everyone within it. Illusion. Futian looked at the demon snake underneath him. No wonder he felt odd earlier. It was an illusion. This demon emperor was actually very cunning and deceitful. In addition, it was also adept in the illusory arts. It used an illusion to deceive everyone's eyes. And the plant that had trapped them all within this space was the true hell's demonic lotus. The practitioners, who had rushed to grab the fake hell's demonic lotus, were bitten by the illusory demonic lotus. After that, a large quantity of power of the great path inside their bodies was devoured while death auras flowed into their bodies. Many people instantly turned black as their life force went out. This is the true hell's lotus. Enjoy this banquet of death, said the demon snake as it looked at the crowd of practitioners. Its eyes were filled with a murderous aura. The expressions on many of their faces changed. This bastard had deliberately shown weakness. It was extremely cunning. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Amidst the flower ocean, the hell's lotus blossomed and charged towards people in an attempt to devour them. The entire space was engulfed in the great path of death's aura. Endless waves of death aura flowed around, and in all directions as they targeted the humans. Many wailing sounds could be heard as practitioners got hit one after another, before being devoured by the hell's lotus. Beigong Ao returned to Futian's side, and used the thunder light screen to protect Futian and their group. He stared at the demonic snake underneath them and said, "This beast is very cunning." Seeing the people around them die one by one, Futian also realized that the demon emperor was actually very strong. It faked being weak when it fought Beigong Ao earlier. "Are you lending power from the hell's demonic lotus?" Futian asked the demon snake. The demon snake glanced at him. Its eyes were full of contempt. A young and puny human actually dared to look at him that way? "You can follow me. Become my mount, and I will let you live," Futian said to the demon snake. The demon snake was stunned after hearing Futian's proposal. Its giant eyes stared at him. It was caught by surprise. Follow him? A young Renhuang actually proposed that it followed him? Another heir of some family. Proud and arrogant. The demon snake's eyes were filled with contempt and ridicule. It seemed like it was not impressed by Futian's words at all. It swung its tail. Then, in an instant, multiple hell's lotus flew towards Futian's direction and tried to devour him. At the same time, the demon snake said, "You are the most arrogant person I've ever met." It was a demon emperor at the 8th plane, and a youngster actually asked it to follow him? "It is your honor." The black wind condor glanced at the demon snake. Futian did not say anything. Seeing the hell's lotuses flying at him, he took a step forward. Not only did he not try to resist or dodge, but he walked towards the hell's lotus. Beigong Ao also did not try to stop him. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference.
as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.